my bank account and got a new card. My daughter and son-in-law waited at my house. Furious, the wind off Lake Michigan was not just a weather event that Tuesday afternoon, it was a physical assault, a freezing, howling beast that rattled the storm windows of my brick bungalow on Maplewood Avenue and buried the streets of Chicago under a foot of relentless, blinding white snow. But the cold outside was nothing compared to the absolute zero temperature of the betrayal waiting for me inside the house I had owned for 45 years. I stood in the small, tiled vestibule, my hands trembling as I shook the heavy, wet snow from my wool coat, my fingers numb not from the winter chill, but from the adrenaline that had been coursing through my veins like liquid fire for the last 72 hours ever since I had discovered the truth that had shattered my world. I had just walked through my own front door, returning 3 days early from a completely fabricated trip to my sister's house in Wisconsin, a lie I had planted to trap the rats nesting in the walls of my life. I hadn't even taken off my boots when the sound of destruction reached me, the unmistakable, heart-wrenching crash of porcelain shattering against the plaster wall of the kitchen, followed immediately by a guttural, animalistic roar of frustration that seemed to vibrate through the hardwood floorboards beneath my feet. I walked into the kitchen, the heart of my home, the room where I had fed my husband Arthur his last meal, the room where I had bandaged my daughter's scraped knees. And I saw the wreckage of my history scattered across the linoleum, lying in sharp, jagged shards. Was my grandmother's antique teapot, a delicate piece hand painted with blue irises that had survived 2 world wars and the Great Depression, now destroyed in a fit of temper tantrum by the man standing over it. Rick, my son-in-law, was pacing the floor like a caged tiger, his face flushed a dangerous, violent crimson, his hands gripping his smartphone with such force I thought the screen would crack under the pressure of his rage. Standing next to him, her face twisted into a mask of ugly panic. Disbelief. Was my daughter Tanya, the child I had birthed, raised, and loved more than my own life. They didn't see a mother standing there in the doorway. They didn't see a 72-year-old woman who had spent her life caring for others as a head nurse. They saw a broken appliance, a malfunctioning ATM that had suddenly, inexplicably, stopped dispensing the cash they needed to fuel their parasitic, delusional lifestyle. Rick lunged at me before I could even set my purse down on the counter, invading my personal space with an aggression that made me flinch, shoving the glowing screen of his phone so close to my face that the harsh light blurred my vision. Declined, he screamed, spittle flying from his lips to land on my cheek. A physical manifestation of his venom. Declined. Evelyn, do you have any concept, any single idea of how humiliating it is to stand at the counter of a luxury car dealership, keys in hand, ready to drive off in a $90,000 SUV, surrounded by salesmen, only to be told loudly that there are insufficient funds? The salesman looked at me like I was a pauper, like I was trash. You humiliated me. I didn't wipe the spit from my cheek. I didn't stammer apologies. A week ago, I would have. A week ago, the old Evelyn, the beaten down, gaslighted, confused Evelyn, would have fumbled for her checkbook, desperate to smooth things over, desperate to buy their love and approval. But that Evelyn had died in a motel room 3 towns over, crying over a stack of bank statements. And the woman standing in the kitchen now was forged from something much harder, something cold and unbreakable. I looked at him, really looked at him for the first time in years, seeing the frantic sweat beading on his forehead, the expensive designer watch on his wrist that I had unknowingly paid for, the soft hands of a man who hadn't done a day of honest work in 4 years. And I felt a calm settle over me like the surface of a frozen lake, deep and dangerous. I didn't make a mistake, Rick, I said, my voice steady, quiet, cutting. His shouting like a surgical scalpel. I closed the account. I transferred every remaining cent, every stock, every bond to a new bank, a new secure vault that neither of you has access to. And I did it 3 days ago while you were busy planning which color leather seats you wanted for the car you were going to buy with my retirement. The gravy train has derailed. And it is never coming back. The silence that followed my words was heavier than the storm raging outside, a vacuum that sucked the oxygen out of the room. Tanya stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock, her eyes wide. With a shock that was quickly morphing into terror, you what she whispered, her voice barely audible, clutching the edge of the granite counter I had installed to please her 2 years ago. Mom, you can't do that. That's our money. We have investments. We have debts. Rick has business partners who are expecting payments. Today we have a lifestyle to maintain. You're going to ruin us, ruin you. I repeated the words, tasting like ash and iron. My mouth, I am saving myself from the ruin you have already caused. Do you think I don't know about the second mortgage you tried to take out in my name last month? The paperwork I found hidden in the trash? Do you think I don't know about the $60,000 you spent on business trips to Las Vegas while I was sitting here in the dark eating canned soup? Because you told me we had to be frugal to save electricity. Do you think I don't know that you pawned your father's gold watch, the one I gave you to keep safe? Rick slammed his fist on the table, the vibration rattling the remaining dishes in the cabinets, his eyes bulging with a mixture of fear and fury. You live under our roof, Evelyn. You are an elderly woman with health issues. We sacrifice our lives, our privacy, our youth to take care of you. And this is how you repay us: by stealing from us, by locking us out of our own resources, our roof. I laughed, a dry, humorless sound that echoed off the cold walls. This house has my name on the deed, my husband Arthur. And I laid the bricks of this patio with our own hands. 40 years ago, we paid the mortgage with blood, sweat, and double shifts at the hospital. You moved in here 4 years ago. Because you were evicted from your downtown apartment for non-payment of rent, you came to me crying, begging for a place to stay for just a few months. Until you got back on your feet. You are not owners, you are guests who have overstayed your welcome by 1,000 days. Tanya burst into tears, the same weaponized tears she had used since she was a teenager, to manipulate me, to guilt me, to get her way. How can you be so cruel? We're family, we love you, we're doing this for you to manage your estate. So you don't have to worry, we just wanted you to be happy. Watching her cry used to tear me apart, it used to be my kryptonite. But today I saw it for what it was: a performance, a calculated display of emotion designed to disarm me. If this is love, Tanya, I said, walking past them to the stairs, my shoulder brushing against Rick's chest without yielding an inch, then I would prefer to be hated. I left them screaming in the kitchen, their voices rising in a crescendo of panic and entitlement. And I walked up the stairs to my bedroom, my sanctuary, locking the door behind me and pushing the heavy oak dresser against it for good measure, my heart pounding against my ribs like a war drum to understand how I reached this moment of absolute severance, how a mother could look at her only child and feel nothing but cold resolve. I have to take you back. Beginning of the slow, insidious erosion of my life, the boiling of the frog that had happened so gradually I hadn't realized I was dying. Until it was almost too late. It started 4 years ago, shortly after Arthur died. The grief was a physical weight, a heavy gray cloak that I dragged around the empty rooms of the bungalow. The silence was deafening when Tanya called me that November afternoon, sobbing about Rick losing his job and their landlord evicting them. I thought it was divine intervention. I thought God was sending me away to fill the empty rooms and help my daughter at the same time come home. I had said, desperate for connection, I need you as much as you need me. The first few months were a honeymoon period, a deception of the highest order. They were helpful, attentive, kind. Rick mowed the lawn, Tanya cooked Sunday dinners, we watched movies together. I felt less alone. But looking back with the clarity of hindsight, I see the grooming process. It started small, harmless requests. Mom, can you cover the electric bill this month? Rick's check is late. Mom, my car broke down and I can't get to interviews without it. Can you help? I gave freely. Arthur had left me comfortable, his life insurance, and my pension as a retired head nurse provided a good nest egg. I wanted to help, but the requests became demands, and the gratitude turned into entitlement. 6 months in, Rick sat me down with a serious, concerned expression. Evelyn, it's foolish for you to stress over finances. At 72, you look tired. Why don't we consolidate, put my name on the account so I can handle the bills, the taxes, the maintenance? You deserve to rest. It sounded logical. I was tired. The grief still came in waves that knocked me off my feet. So I signed. I handed over the keys to the kingdom, believing I was being taken care of. That was when the mask slipped, revealing the monsters beneath. The first change was the atmosphere in the house. I went from being the matriarch to being an inconvenience, a ghost, haunting their new life. If I walked into the Living room while they were watching TV, they would sigh loudly and turn up the volume to drown me out if I cooked a meal they didn't like. They would order expensive takeout sushi, steak, lobster, and eat it in front of me without offering a bite. Your stomach can't handle this spicy food, Mom Tanya would say, biting into a $40 steak. While I ate toast, then came the gaslighting. It was subtle, terrifyingly effective. I would place my glasses on the side table, and an hour later, they would be gone. I would search, frantically questioning my sanity, only for Rick to find them in the refrigerator or the bathroom cabinet or the trash. Can Mom, you're getting worse, he would say with fake concern, shaking his head. Your memory is slipping. You're becoming dangerous to yourself. Maybe we need to talk about Dr. Eris. Dr. Eris was a doctor. They had found a man who seemed all too eager to prescribe heavy sedatives for agitated elderly patients. They started convincing me I was losing my mind. I stopped going out because I was afraid I would get lost. I stopped calling my friends because Tanya told me I was embarrassing her on the phone with my ramblings and stories that didn't make sense. I became a prisoner in my own home, isolated, confused, dependent, and medicated. They spent my money with a voracious appetite, renovations on the house that I didn't want, a home theater in the basement, a wine cellar stocked with vintages I couldn't pronounce, a high-tech security system that seemed more designed to keep me in than keep burglars out. When I questioned the cost, they would pat my hand condescendingly and say, "Don't worry your pretty little head about numbers, Evelyn. We're increasing the property value for the inheritance." The inheritance that was all I was to them, a waiting room for a payout. But the shattering realization the moment the fog lifted, and the horror set in, happened 10 days ago. I had snuck out to the library, my only remaining refuge, telling them I was going to nap. I needed to breathe air that didn't smell of their expensive cologne and lies. On my way back, I decided to stop at the local bank branch to withdraw $50. I wanted to buy a birthday card and a small gift for my estranged granddaughter, Mia. Mia was Tanya's daughter from a previous marriage, a brilliant, headstrong girl studying law in Boston who I hadn't seen in 3 years because Tanya claimed Mia didn't want to see me in my condition, and that she was ashamed of my dementia. When I put my card in the ATM, the screen flashed red, insufficient funds. I stared at it, confused. I tried again, same message. I went inside, trembling, thinking it was a computer glitch. I sat down with a personal banker, a woman named Sarah who had known Arthur for years. "Sarah," I said, my hands shaking on her mahogany desk, "there must be a mistake. I should have over $200,000 in that savings account plus the checking balance." Sarah pulled up my file, and I saw the color drain from her face. She clicked her mouse, her expression turning to one of horror. She turned the monitor toward me. "Evelyn," she said softly, "are you aware of these transactions?" I stared at the screen, and my world collapsed. It wasn't just daily expenses, it was a slaughter: $30,000 for a boat rental in the Caribbean, $12,000 for a bespoke suit, $5,000 at a casino, payments for a Porsche lease, monthly transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. The balance was not 200,000, it was $42. They had drained me dry. They had stolen everything Arthur and I had worked for: my security, my future, my dignity. I sat there unable to breathe, feeling a pain in my chest, so acute I thought I was having a heart attack. But it wasn't my heart failing, it was my heart breaking. They told me I was confused. I whispered, tears streaming down my face. They told me I was forgetting things. They told me I was crazy. Sarah reached across the desk and held my hand, her grip tight. "You are not confused, Evelyn. You are being exploited. We need to freeze this immediately. We need to call the police." "No," I said, a sudden cold clarity washing over me, a survival instinct I hadn't felt since my days in the trauma unit. "If we freeze it, now they will know. They will come up with a lie. They will say I gave them permission. They will say I am senile. They will hurt me." I formulated a plan then, and they're a plan born of pure desperation. "Open a new account," I told Sarah, "one they cannot see. Transfer the remaining $42 and print me every single statement from the last 4 years, every single transaction." I walked out of that bank with a stack of papers thick enough to be a novel of betrayal. I didn't go home immediately. I sat on a park bench across the street from my bungalow, and watched. I saw Rick come out on the porch lighting a cigar, laughing on his phone. I saw Tanya receive a delivery of designer shopping bags. They looked so happy, feasting on the carcass of my life. I went back inside and played the part of the fool one last time. I acted confused. I apologized for things I hadn't done, and I told them I was going to visit my sister in Wisconsin for a week to give them some space. They were delighted. They practically packed my bags for me, eager to get me out of the house so they could throw a party. I took a cab to a motel 3 towns over, a cheap place with flickering neon signs. And I spent 3 days sitting on a lumpy mattress, highlighting every fraudulent transaction on those statements with a yellow marker. The total theft was nearly $250,000. I also called Mia. My granddaughter answered on the second ring. Grandma, she said, surprise evident in her voice. Mom said you were unable to use the phone anymore. She said you didn't know who I was. Your mother lied. I said, my voice strong. Mia, I need help. I need a lawyer, and I need to know if you really didn't want to see me. There was a silence on the line, and then a sob. Grandma, Mom told me you didn't want to see me. She said you were angry that I went to law school instead of nursing. She said you had written me out of the will and banned me from the house. The web of lies was so vast, it was suffocating. We cried together on the phone for an hour, bridging the gap of 3 stolen years. And then Mia, my brilliant, fierce Mia, went into lawyer mode. Don't go back there alone, Grandma, she warned. I'm flying and I'll be there in 2 days. But you need to protect yourself until then. That brings us back to the kitchen, to the shattered teapot and the screaming. I spent the night barricaded in my room, listening to them downstairs there. Arguments escalated as the night went on. They were panicking. They tried my door handle a few times, whispering threats. But they didn't dare break it down. The host was fighting back, and the parasites were starving. I spent the night awake, clutching my phone, watching the snow pile up on the windowsill, waiting for the dawn. The next morning, the storm had cleared, leaving the world bright and blindingly white. I heard a car door slam. Then another. I looked out the window and saw a police cruiser and a sleek black sedan pulling into the unplowed driveway. Mia had arrived, and she hadn't come alone. I moved the dresser, unlocked the door, and went downstairs, moving past the pile of broken porcelain still on the floor. When I opened the front door, Mia rushed to me, burying her face in my shoulder. She smelled of cold air, expensive shampoo, and justice. Behind her stood a police officer and a man in a suit who I assumed was a senior partner from her firm. We walked into the kitchen where Rick and Tanya were sitting, drinking coffee, looking haggard, aggressive, and hungover. When they saw the police officer, Rick stood up so fast his chair toppled over. What is this? He demanded, trying to muster his usual bluster. Evelyn, did you call the cops on your own family? Are you having another episode? She didn't. Mia stepped forward, her voice ice cold, her posture rigid. I did. I am Mia Vance, representing Evelyn Moore, and this is a formal notice of immediate eviction and a temporary restraining order. Tanya looked at her daughter as if she were seeing Ghost. Mia, what are you doing? You can't represent her against us. We're your parents. She's sick. She doesn't know what she's doing. And she is your mother. Mia shot back, slamming a file onto the table. I have the bank statements, Mom. I have the records of the elder abuse. I have the emails where you discussed having Grandma declared incompetent so you could sell the house and buy a condo in Florida. I have the evidence of the forgery. It's over. The officer stepped forward, his hand resting near his belt. Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, we have received a credible report of financial fraud and elder abuse. We are opening a criminal investigation. In the meantime, this restraining order requires you to vacate the premises immediately. You have 30 minutes to collect your personal effects and leave. If you argue, you will be arrested for trespassing. The transformation in Rick was pathetic. The blustering bully dissolved into a weeping coward in seconds. It was a misunderstanding. We were investing for her. We were going to pay it back with interest. We just needed a little more time. Save it for the judge, the officer said impassively. Start packing. I sat at the kitchen table watching them pack. It was a surreal, silent movie. They threw clothes into garbage bags. They glared at me with hatred, but they didn't dare speak. With the officer watching every move, Tanya stopped at the door, holding a bag of clothes, looking at me one last time. Her eyes were cold, devoid of any remorse. You're going to die alone in this big house, she spat, her voice venomous, and when you do, Don't expect us to come to the funeral. I'd rather die alone in peace than live with you in hell, I replied, softly feeling the final tether between us snap. Goodbye, Tanya. When the door closed behind them, the sound was like a gunshot ending a war. The silence that rushed back into the house wasn't heavy this time. It was light, it was clean, it was the sound of freedom. Mia stayed with me for 2 weeks. We cleaned the house from top to bottom, scrubbing away the stains of their presence. We painted the guest room a bright yellow to cover the gray walls they had chosen. We cooked meals that were spicy and rich and ate them laughing. Until our sides hurt, we went to the bank and secured my assets so tightly that not even a ghost could get in. The legal battle that followed was ugly and long. Rick and Tanya tried everything, claiming I was insane, claiming I had gifted them the money, claiming Mia was manipulating me. But the paper trail was irrefutable. They faced criminal charges for fraud and elder abuse. They avoided prison by taking a plea deal that left them with felony records and a mountain of restitution debt they would be paying off for the rest of their lives. They lost their status, their friends, and their daughter. 6 months later, spring has arrived in Chicago. The snow has melted, revealing the black earth of my garden. I am on my knees planting tulips, feeling the cool soil between my fingers. I am 73 years old. I have less money than I used to, but I have enough. I have my house, I have my mind, and I have Mia who calls me. Every Sunday, I realized something profound in the silence of my empty house. We are taught that family is a sacred bond that must be preserved at all costs. We are taught that a mother's love must be sacrificial, endless, a well that never runs dry. But that is a lie that allows predators to feast. Blood is not a binding contract for abuse. The most courageous act of love I ever performed was not raising my daughter, it was saving myself from her. I learned that no is a complete sentence. I learned that my dignity is not a currency to be traded for companionship. As I pat the dirt around a bulb, I think of the winter that has passed. It was long and it was cold, and it almost killed me, but the winter is over. The sun is warm on my back. I am alone, but I am not lonely. I am Evelyn Moore, and for the first time in 4 years, I am blooming.